Good afternoon and welcome, or good morning, depending on where you're located. And thank you all for joining today's ACLCA webinar titled Bees Online Revival, Selecting Cost-Effective, Environmentally Preferable Building Products Just Got Easier. My name is Brandy Sebastian, and I'm the Lifecycle Assessment Manager at the Steel Recycling Institute, which is part of the American Iron and Steel Institute. I also serve as the Vice Chair of the American Center for Lifecycle Assessment. Most of you are probably familiar, but ACLCA is a nonprofit membership organization that brings together diverse organizations with a stake in the implementation and application of LCA. ACLCA hosts webinars, has a monthly member newsletter, administers certification programs, and has active industry, education, policy, PCR, and certification committees. And it also produces the annual LCA Conference, which is the largest LCA meeting in North America. It will be held this year from October 2nd to the 5th in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The call for abstracts as well as registration are now open for the conference, and you can find out more by visiting the website on your screen, lcaxvii.org. ACLCA will be hosting 2 additional webinars in the month of April. There's another one by NIST on Thursday, and there's one by ACLCA's esteemed chair, Bill Flanagan of GE, on April 19th. We hope you'll join us for those as well. And before we start, just a few quick housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So while we're going through, please type your questions into the GoToWebinar panel, typically on the right of your screen. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on ACLCA's YouTube page on Wednesday, April 13th. If you have any questions, please email Debbie Steckel, ACLCA's Executive Director, at the email address listed on your screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Dr. Joshua Kneifel. Josh is an economist in the Applied Economics Office of the Engineering Laboratory at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. Josh joined the staff at the Applied Economics Office from the University of Florida in 2008, where he received his PhD in economics. His research at NIST implements whole building energy simulation, life cycle costing, and life cycle environmental assessment to determine the economic and environmental consequences of increasing the energy efficiency of buildings and construction. Josh is the project lead for the Metrics and Tools for Sustainable Buildings project, which uses measurement science to develop and implement metrics for quantifying sustainability in buildings and research, and develop decision support tools for stakeholders. He oversees the development of software tools that calculate the sustainability performance of individual building products and whole buildings. Along with his work in sustainability, Josh oversees the economics of the Smart Grid project for the Engineering Laboratory's Smart Grid Program Office and the Building Lifecycle Cost Project funded by DOE's Federal Energy Management Program. Josh is joined today by Annie Lanfield-Gregg, who is the principal and owner of 4 Elements Consulting. A lifecycle assessment certified professional, Annie provides LCA and lifecycle management services for corporations, government, and non-government organizations to help them find valuable environmental and cost management solutions for their products and operations. seem to have lost my slides. Just a second. Oh. Sorry about that. Annie serves on the certification committee of ACLCA. She holds a bachelor's degree in geology from Boston College and a master's in environmental management from Duke University. Annie was one of the LCA practitioners 2 decades ago, assisting NIST with the earliest versions of bees. And with that, I will turn things over to Josh.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us on the webinar. For those of you that weren't actually on the webinar last week, I'm an economist at NIST, but I've play a role of an engineer, environmental scientist, and whole building energy modeling, as well as life cycle assessment. And I've been in NIST for about 8.5 years now, and one second, there we go. And kind of the major project that I oversee is metrics and tools for sustainable buildings. And really what we're looking at doing is trying to measure sustainability, and using science-based metrics, using a life cycle approach. So for the economic side, we use life cycle costing, and then on the environmental side, we actually use life cycle impact assessment. And really what we're trying to do is to inform stakeholders so they can make the best decisions possible. Those stakeholders range widely across sectors, looking at a number of different industries and private sector, looking at certification and code organizations, government agencies, academia, as well as the general public. And we do publish a lot related to this project, but the main thing that I've will focus on here is one of the software tools, which is Bees. And for those of you that are familiar with it, the original version came out, I believe, in 1997. There's been multiple iterations of it. It started as an executable, and then in 2011 we shifted to a web interface. So it's always been free to use, and now you simply just go to the website and you can use it straight from there. We now have over 250 building products in Bees, and allows you to do the life cycle costing and life cycle impact assessment of similar products. So different types of insulation, different types of flooring, and so forth. The shift to the web interface was really trying to improve kind of the ability to maintain the tool. There's a lot less maintenance involved. You don't have to worry about having it correctly run on different operating systems. And it also allows for an immediate addition of new products. So as soon as we have new data, we can roll it out. We don't have to release a new version of the tool. We simply push the new data, and then everyone has immediate access to it. And so I'll give you a demo of Bees Online, and I'll also give you a demo of Bees Online 2.0, which is currently in a beta status. We're about to start beta testing, so if you're interested, let me know, and it'd be great to get some feedback from industry and from the LCA community on what we're doing. And given that Bees is used for selecting individual products, we really think that this is targeting architects and designers that are selecting materials to go into their buildings. I think there's also a role related to acquisitions, such as sustainable acquisition requirements for the federal government, as well as certifiers and the general public, of trying to inform them in terms of their decisions in trying to make more sustainable choices in their home or their business. And for those of you that aren't familiar with our framework, the Bees metrics are really designed using two key components. One I mentioned was life cycle costing for the economic side, where you're really just looking at all the costs associated with the product over its lifetime. So it's all the initial installation costs, but also any future costs related to that, whether it's installation, maintenance, or repair, and so forth. And so we estimate all those costs. discount all those to present value terms so you can get a consistent comparison. And that's relatively straightforward conceptually. The little bit more complicated aspect is the life cycle assessment, although most of you on the phone are probably going to be quite familiar with this process, where you're trying to account for all the environmental impacts associated with the product. So you look at all the flows associated with that product throughout all the inputs that go into it, ranging from, for example, for climate change, you're looking at carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, and so forth. And then what you have to do is find a way to sum those flows into a common unit. And so, like for climate change, you're looking at CO2 equivalent, so that you have factors that you can multiply the units of methane to get a CO2 equivalent value. And so you aggregate all those up, it gives you that particular impact category set of flows. And we actually have 13 different flows in B's. It's really based on Tracy, but we also incorporated land use, water use, and an indoor air quality metric, because that's something that's really important in terms of, at least inside a building, the indoor air quality is an important factor of building performance. And so a lot of the analysis that I do in particular is really looking at this level, where you look at the different environmental impacts. But we've also developed an approach that you can use to actually create a weighted normalized average of those impact categories to get a single value. Basically, you normalize based on the total flows in the U.S. for a year, and then you take a weighted average of those normalized values across the different impact categories based on how important each category is to you, so that it can give you a single score. This is relatively useful for people that really don't fully understand the complexities of the impact categories and exactly what those mean. So it's just a way to try to make the decision process a little bit easier. I tend to do analysis in terms of our publications that are at the impact category level and not this weighted normalized average, but it is an option built into the tool. And so at that gives you a brief background on bees. Now we'll just go ahead and actually go through a simple example. And so here you can see the main page for bees. Just gives you a brief introduction on what the tool is. You can access the tutorial right here to help walk you through an example, or you can just simply go to Analyze Building Products. And the first page that you go to, it has a couple of analysis parameters that you have to select. The first is that weighted normalized average. The way that gets calculated is by using either a predefined weight or something that you actually define yourself. Let's ignore that for now. We'll just do no weighting. So in environmental claims and so forth for the tool, you're actually not supposed to use a weight. And so that's what we'll assume, so then we don't have to worry about the weighted averages of those impact categories. You have to also, for the economic side, you actually have to select a discount rate, which is essentially your alternative, your next best alternative in terms of an investment. So let's just assume 3%, but a user can input any value that they'd like. And then from there, you have to select what exactly you want to compare. And so in this case, we're going to do an example using flooring. And this is all based on Uniformat 2, so it's a standard layout of the different materials that are used in building construction. And so we'll go into interiors, and then within the interior finishes, there is floor coverings. And so there's a list of the products. You can actually look to see what's in there. And if you're not familiar with Uniformat 2, you can. It's relatively straightforward to think through. But if you have any issues, you can actually search a list of Uniformat 2 and get that information. So let's move forward with an example using floor coverings. And you can see here the next step is actually select the products that you want to compare. And there's actually quite a few flooring products in here. I think there's over 40, I believe. And there's this long list that you can select from. When you let's do a comparison of two generic carpets. So let's go with generic nylon carpet tile. And you can see when you click on that, then it gives you some additional options. You can actually change, or it actually gives you a default value for the transportation distance going from where the manufacturer is to where you're going to install the product. This is a value that it's defaulted, but you can actually change it if you'd like. So you can go in and type in, 500 miles or 1,500 miles, depending on your situation. But for now, we'll just stick with the default value, and then we'll select this alternative. So you can see down here, it's included that you've selected already. And let's compare this to a generic wool carpet tile. And so similarly, you can change the values. If you know where these products are coming from, you can actually customize that transportation distance. But for now, let's use the defaulted values. So once you've selected all the alternatives that you'd want to compare, you click compute, and what's going on is it's looking at all the underlying LCI data, and it's making a calculation for those impact category flows. And then once it tells you all calculations are complete, then this View Reports button pops up, and then you click on the View Reports. And so that's all the selections you had to make, and now here's the results page, where you can get some summaries with regards to the life cycle costs here, where you can see the first versus future cost breakdown of the two products. What I'm assuming this group will be more interested in is the life cycle stage graphs. And then so for an example, you can select any of the environmental impact categories here and see a breakdown of the flows for that particular impact category by life cycle stage. And so you can see here the raw materials is really driving most of the results for climate change. So you can see that it's a small amount, but the nylon tile actually has greater impacts in the non-raw material stages, but that raw materials by far overwhelms with regards to the wool tile versus the nylon tile. And you get a table down here that actually gives you the exact values. So if you want to know the exact numbers of each of these categories, you can see them down here. Similarly, you can see the breakdown of the different environmental impact categories by the flow that you're looking at. So whether it's carbon dioxide, CFCs and so forth, you can actually see the breakdown of the top categories. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward to use. If you need, if you want help, you can actually click here and you can get some help information related to assumptions on the how the economic and environmental performance are calculated. You can actually get information on the details of the documentation for the different products. We can find one that actually has a good breakdown. So here you can actually see you get a flow diagram and all the assumed inputs that go into the products. So everything is well documented, so you can look and see how these were calculated. So that's a brief introduction to Bees Online. Let's go ahead and then move on to discussions on the new version of Bees. So Bees Online 2.0 beta, it's going to be released in beta version sometime this month. There's really just a couple minor things that I'm having our IT specialist change right now, but I would hope in the next couple of weeks it will be up and ready for beta testing. When we went to develop the new version, it really kind of was a result of a couple of inquiries into giving webinars related to the flooring products and how it might be used for sustainable acquisitions. And as a result, it kind of brought up the fact that this software was was released in 2011 and hadn't been updated since. It really needed to be at least refreshed, if not fully redeveloped. And so I reached out to a number of stakeholders, government agencies, industry organizations, as well as some certification organizations and LCA experts with regards to what we should include, what's changed since the last version was released, and trying to make this as kind of as powerful of a tool and useful of a tool as possible. So I do want to give a shout out to thank all the different individuals that I've interacted with to try to come up with this new version. And as a result of those discussions, it led to a development plan that involved updating the web interface, pretty significantly changing the features and process in which you make selections, while still maintaining all the underlying scientific framework in Bees Online. We started with the flooring category, namely because it seemed to be the category that was of most interest to people that have reached out to me. And we kind of started with the most complex category just because of the nature of flooring versus some of the other products that we have. And we're working on developing some more products now, and we'll moving forward we'll basically update all the categories that are in Bees Online, but we're also looking for new categories if there's of interest from industry to incorporate their products into bees. We've updated all the LCA data based on current LCA and industry practices, databases, as well as the life cycle impact assessment methods. We're also allowing for filtering of products to try to make it easier to select products throughout the tool, whether it's by the product type or characteristics or even product certifications. And you'll see that in the new version demo that we're looking for some feedback specifically related to that. And we're also allowing for a couple of different impact category options. So not only do we have the bees categories that you saw in Bees Online, but we're also allowing you to select the Tracy 2 categories. And for each product category, you're going to be able to select the impact categories required by that product category rules. So that's something that I think we're adding that could be very useful given the push for PCR development and creation of EPDs for products. So we're consistent with what industries come to at least some consensus on of what to include in terms of impact categories for a given product type. Also, something that really came out of discussions with government agencies is the incorporation of the social cost of carbon. So at the moment, that's currently incorporated in the tool. We'll see if that push for including that into decision making continues with the current administration, but at this point, it hasn't been excluded. There's executive orders that are out there that still require it. So for now, we'll leave it in and then go from there. So at that, we'll move on to the demo of Bees Online 2.0 beta. And I will apologize, it's on a development server, so it sometimes runs a little bit slow. When it gets into production, it will actually move much quicker. So similar to Bees, we kind of have an intro page giving some background into what Bees is, and then some brief explanation of what Bees Online 2.0 is adding, how it's changed. There will be a tutorial and a user manual, just like in Bees Online. We'll also incorporate a frequently asked questions document that'll be a living document that we'll update as people bring up questions related to the tool to try to help users. But let's go ahead and move on to analyzing building products. So you can say it's thinking a little bit here. But just like in Bees Online, it's based on Uniformat 2. And you can see there's a list of all the different major group elements. But at the moment, since we only have flooring, everything else is grayed out. But we wanted to show the capabilities of incorporating products into those different building elements. So here you will select basically the same example that we did in the Bees Online. We'll do the same thing in the beta version of Bees 2.0. So we'll look at interior finishes and floor coverings. And as we update data for new product categories, we'll basically shift it from Bees Online over to Bees 2.0. So let's start doing the same example. So we want to do floor coverings, but here's one of the key additions that we've made, is that we're actually allowing you to filter the products before you get to the list of selecting them. So if you remember, there was 40 to 45 products. You have to go through that entire list to select things. We thought it'd be much easier to narrow it down. So if you just want to look at carpet or hardwood flooring, something like that, then you can narrow it down relatively quickly. And also a lot of the assumptions that we'll make vary on whether it's in a residential or commercial setting. So the first selection is whether or not you're using it for a residential building or commercial building. And so in this case, let's assume that we're trying to put flooring into a commercial building, and we want to narrow down our options based on a product type. And so you can see that there's 5 categories. Something that we did add from the previous version of Bees already is we incorporated hardwood floor options. And so you can narrow it down. You can select one or more of these, which then will further narrow down if you want to look at the product subtypes. So under carpet, there's actually 2 types, whether it's broadloom or whether it's tile. So in this case, let's just select carpet tile. So now we're narrowing it down. Instead of having to compare, select off of 45 products, you've got just a handful when we get to the point of actually selecting specific products to compare. Another addition is actually this filter based on either characteristic or product certification. And this long list is just an example of everything we could include. We're definitely looking for feedback as to which characteristics or certifications would be of most use to users. So if you have any feedback on that, just let us know. I essentially just pulled every single certification off of all the products that are in Bees, just to see what we could possibly include. So we'd really like to narrow this down to say 5 or 10, as opposed to the, I think, almost 30 that we have at the moment. But for now, let's not include any of those characteristics or certification filters. Since we're already narrowing it down just to carpet tile, it's narrowing it down quite a bit already. And one thing to note as well is in the old version, in Bees Online, we do not have a back button. So that was one of the first things that I wanted to add into the new version, is to make sure we can go back and forth from one step to the next. So you can go back and make a change if you realize you made a mistake. In the previous version, you have to go back and start all over again. So now that we've filtered it down to carpet tile, the next thing we have to select are the analysis assumptions. And so as you can see, we've moved this from the initial page of the tool to a little bit later after you've narrowed down your products. And this is also an option that wasn't in the previous version. You could actually select with which impact methodology you want to use. You can either, you can use the Bees categories, just the Tracy 2 categories, or specifically to a product category, what the PCR impact categories are. So in this case, actually for flooring, it's actually based on CML and not Tracy 2. So we're developing the CML when appropriate. So in this case, that's where we're using it. And then also, if you want to include economic analysis, you can. If all you really care about are the environmental impacts, then you can just click no, and you won't have any economic analysis included. Similar to Bees Online, if you are going to do economic analysis, then you need a discount rate, so that way you discount any future costs appropriately. And I mentioned that we're incorporating social cost of carbon. If you want to include a cost for carbon, you can do so. If not, you can exclude it. And we actually have a default value based on the social cost of carbon calculations that are developed by the EPA. But if that number isn't appropriate for you, then you can go ahead and put in a custom number. So you can change this to whatever you want. So let's do an economic analysis, and we'll use the default value for the cost of carbon. So once you've made those selections, you just move to the next page. And this is something else that I want to make sure that it was clear to a user what they had selected, to make sure that what they had selected is what they thought they had. So if they did make a mistake, they can go back and make those changes. So if we're good with what we have in terms of the selections, move on to next. And here you get to the point where you actually select products for comparison. And so let's select the two products we did in the Bees Online beta or demo. So the generic carpet tile, both for nylon and wool. So in this case, similar to Bees Online, you can change how far the product is being shipped from the manufacturer. So this is just within the US. And so there's a default value, but you can go in and put your own value in if you find something that's a more appropriate estimate. Something else to note here is we actually identify if something is produced overseas, that there's shipping from wherever it's produced to the US, that value is fixed. So there, like for flooring products, we have some products that are made in Europe. And so then those must get shipped from overseas, so we need to account for that distance traveled. And then one new option that we've included that wasn't in Bees Online is the ability to account for use phase for flooring products. And the reason for including it is that it's an important aspect to the environmental impacts for the life cycle of a product. And if you want, you can zero it out and exclude it altogether. We've given default values based on the values that are actually in existing EPDs. So this is all citable of where we're getting these default values. But obviously this could vary quite a bit from building to building, how often they clean and so forth. So in the residential setting, you may not vacuum or sweep very often, so you can actually put in fractions of an activity per week. So if you only vacuum once every 2 weeks, you can put in 0.5 and it'll account for that. So all those values could be changed if you desire. And so we wanted to give the user the ability to customize it based on their actual situation. So let's just use all the default values for simplicity. We've selected these two products for comparison, and we'll move on to the next step. And so now we've gotten to the results page. And once again, we're reviewing what the users have selected to make sure that's what they were wanting to select and the assumptions they were wanting to make. We also included the product life here for the two, so it was clear to the user how long those products are assumed to last. For the analysis side of things, we've actually included a download button. So all the data below that I'll show you is downloadable, and so you can manipulate it to make any graphs that you may want for your particular purpose. So we can't possibly incorporate all the potential aspects or graphs and visuals that people may want to see, so we want to give them the capability to make their own. And so I would note that that's going to be broken, or at least not downloadable in the beta testing, because we're still finalizing all the data that's in here. So don't use any of these results for actual analysis, but it's more of, we wanted to show the capabilities, and we're the data is pretty solid, but we do want to make some final confirmations, particularly from specific manufacturers, that they're comfortable with their data and they want to include their products. So moving on to the visuals that we've created. This first one here is looking at basically all the impact categories and breakdowns that are required in the product category rule. And so what you can do is, so we're consistent with the product category rule requirements, where all that information is here and available. And so it's broken down by impact category, by life cycle stage, for each of the products. And so depending on which product you look at, these numbers will change. And then similar in Bees Online, you have a graph for each of the environmental impact categories, and then you can see it broken down by life cycle stage. And I would note that this does exclude use phase, and so this is essentially the same exact graph you'd see in Bees Online, although it's obviously updated, and you can actually scroll over here and see the numbers of each of the individual values in the stacked bar graph. And just like in Bees Online, you have the table underneath that shows you the actual numbers. And then you can also go down, since we did the economic analysis, you can actually see the breakdown of the life cycle costs as well as the cost of carbon for these two options. And so you can see that the social cost of carbon is not overly large for these particular options. Part of it may be the assumed value that we use for the cost. And some of it may just be the relative magnitude of the carbon is small relative to the rest of the costs associated with the product. So that's just a brief demo of the new tool. So I think it's a lot cleaner. It's a little bit easier to maneuver. I think it's more clear with regards to being able to see what you've selected and interpret it, and also being able to allow the user to still customize things that could vary significantly from user to user. So at that, we'll bounce back to the presentation. And at this point, really we are looking for as many beta testers as possible. If you are interested in beta testing, send me an email and I will send you a link to the tool. I do ask that if you're going to share the link, please get my permission first. We want to have a lot of beta testers, but we also want to control viewership, because we want to make sure that everything is correct and running, is really functional before we actually make it a public release. Once again, don't use any of the results. We haven't yet fully finalized the data. That once we do a public release of the beta version, then that'll be done when we have confirmation on that, as well as confirmation there's no significant errors occurring in the software. And we're looking for feedback for kind of a wide range of overarching questions. This is not a survey. We're just asking, we're asking the open-ended question for any feedback you may have. But here's a few kind of topics or questions that we're definitely interested in getting some feedback on. One is your background, whether or not you've used Bees Online before, and how exactly you've used it, and whether or not you plan to use it in the future. Thoughts on the new version relative to the old version, what you like, what you don't like, what could be improved, as well as, like for those filtering options, what particular would be of most use to you, as well as what supplemental material may be useful. We'll definitely do documentation with it for a user guide. We'll do a tutorial to walk you through an example. We'll also have an FAQ that will be available to try to assist users. Something else that I'm looking at doing is incorporating basically a distance matrix. So something that can allow a user to go, okay, well, I know that this product's produced in Georgia and I'm located in Denver. How far is it for that transportation? And so you can actually look up the two cities and then populate your number that fits your expected transportation. One other thing I'd also like to include is which will be in the documentation, but maybe we'll do a small document that identifies location of manufacturer-specific products. So, if there's multiple locations for a product that's produced, we can include those so the user could then select their closest site for production. So those are some things that we're looking at with regards to wanting feedback on. But obviously, we're open to any comments, recommendations for improvement, and so forth. So with that, I think we can open it up for questions. Looks like I stuck with about that 40-minute time frame, so we got plenty of time.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. This is Brandy again. So it looks like we do have a few questions that have come in. The first is, what category is next for updating after flooring, or is that yet to be determined?
Right. So we're looking at a few, and Annie might be able to jump in if I forget anything. But we're going to update the insulation. We're going to incorporate some gypsum products. We're going to do coatings, and we're going to do exterior wall finishes. And I'm not sure if I'm missing anything or not.
I think that's about right.
Okay.
Okay, the second question, are the materials compared on a unit basis, or is it possible to enter amounts as they would be used in a building? So what is the unit of measurement?
Right, so it is on a per unit basis. For the flooring, it's square feet. So it's simple enough to essentially take that CSV file and then just multiply by square footage that you're looking at. So it is on a per unit basis, but we have not included the option to aggregate those up to the total building usage.
Okay. The third question, can you speak a bit more about what all the economic analysis includes?
Right, so at the moment it essentially includes the initial installation as well as any replacement that occurs in the future. We're using life cycle cost methodology, so it does also take into account any residual value at the end of the study period. So if you look, we're looking over 60 years, and so if you replace the product in year 50, there's obviously some lifetime left at the end of that study period. So we take that into account as well. So we're consistent with the life cycle cost methodology and the ASTM standards associated with that.
Okay. The next question, do the data capture potential end-of-life management?
Yes, they do. And we look mostly at construction landfills, and if a product is recycled, I have to look at the recycling methodology, but we do take into account what's being done based on either national averages of that kind of building product, or what's actually happening, or if it is a manufacturer-specific product, we find out about their take-back programs if they have any. So yes, it is accounting for end of life.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions that have just come in. So how did you select these impact categories? Based on which criteria? What were the criteria that you used?
Well, so the impact categories, I mean, Tracy 2, which is the most commonly used in the U.S., from my understanding, and in the B's categories, which we essentially take Tracy 2 and add on water, land, and indoor air quality. And so we felt those three were important to include as options. And then the PCR impact categories, it's all based on the PCR for that particular product. So for flooring, there's clearly defined impact categories to include based on that, and so that was the method that we used to make those selections.
And for other PCRs that we look at for the next building product categories, we'll use those will use bees / Tracy 2, as Josh has described, plus those PCR categories that are required in there. So it could vary slightly from building product to building product.
Great. Okay, so the next question there's a couple related questions together. So do you have data on the users of bees? Who is using it? Are they primarily LCA practitioners or designers / architects? Can you speak to this?
Yeah, so when we switched to the online version, it made it a lot more difficult to really track users. And so we do see some trends that I think there's a significant academic usage. So using it, I think, in classes and that type of thing to teach life cycle assessment and so forth. I know there's definitely some interest in using it for like product acquisitions, because I've had several webinars requests for that in the last couple of years. So I'm curious to see how people are using it and exactly how wide that audience is, and if what we're doing can target those audiences better or other audiences. So getting that feedback from current bees users would be great. It's difficult to do a survey based on the Paperwork Reduction Act with regards to users, and so that's why we kind of leave it with an open-ended question of any feedback they may want to give. But yeah, so it is difficult to follow. We can see some information related to the IP addresses to some extent. There's definitely an academic following. The rest of it is most of it you can't actually tell exactly where it's coming from.
From before Bees Online, when Bobby Lippiett was there at NIST running this program, or overseeing this program, that is, she collected those kind of statistics. And so we could dig that up. They would be several years old, but if you're interested, you could contact us and, to get an idea of several years ago what it looked like, because as Josh said in the previous version, it was easier to track that kind of thing. But I know that Bobby kept some pretty good statistics on just that.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. So the final question we have for now is, are you planning on adding any wood products in the future? If so, what are your plans?
Yeah, so we do have some in Bees Online already for like wood framing and so forth. We definitely could include it in the future based on industry interest and collaboration. So definitely whoever sent that question, go ahead and email me, and we can start some discussions.
And there are, in the floor category, there is wood floors now.
Oh, right, yes, the hardwood floors, yes.
Hardwood, yep.
Oh, and one more just came in. So what about other structural materials?
So I'm assuming you mean like steel framing and so forth? Is that
concrete?
Concrete,
yeah. They didn't specify.
Concrete in particular, we have, I think, currently in there almost 100 products related to concrete, whether it's beams or columns and so forth. That's actually what we are currently looking to target in 2018 after this next round. So that's one of the big ones, because that's a lot of the products that are currently in bees are related to concrete, and so we're looking at targeting those. And then when we do the framing, looking at steel would be something that we look at, as well as the wood as well.
Great. Well, it looks like that is the end of the questions for now. As you've mentioned, we see your contact information here, so I'm sure people can follow up after the webinar if they think of something they weren't able to bring up today. And like I mentioned at the beginning, the webinar has been recorded and will be made available on ACLCA's YouTube page in just a couple days. So I'd like to wrap things up by thanking you all for attending, and a special thanks to our presenters, Dr. Joshua Kneifel at NIST, and for the informative presentation and demo, and to Josh and Annie Lanfield Gregg for answering lots of great questions. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.